Hello everyone. I wanted to make a quick video about how exactly I put together my dried gouache palette. And when I say dried gouache, I mean I'm pouring gouache into a pan, letting it dry, and then using it regularly. Usually that's for my outdoor sessions. When I'm in the studio, I have wet gouache squeezed out onto a palette. I just prefer it that way. But when I'm traveling, when I'm outside, it's just so much easier to pop one of these into my backpack and paint from a dried palette, just like watercolor. I have a ton of videos showing me using this outside. I did it for the entire month of plein April, painting outside every day during April this year and most of last year as well. So that, in addition to dozens of others, I will pop a playlist in the description if you just want to watch it in action. But today is all about how to do it. So when it comes to palettes, that is very personal. I use portable painters. They're just my ideal kit outside. They're a self-contained travel watercolor kit. The sides attach so you can put your water in one side or both sides, brushes in another side, and then it opens up to the palette inside, and then you have your mixing space. I am a brand ambassador for Portable Painter, and you can get a discount if you use my code. All of the information for that is in the description. There are a ton of different palette types out there, everything from plastic with large mixing space to a little Altoid tin with pans magnetized to the inside, or you could even just use blue sticky tack or like glue, anything. You can get really creative when you're making your palettes. Anyways, let's move on to how exactly I prepare the gouache in the watercolor pans. So no matter what palette I'm using, I have gouache ready to go. The first pour is going to fill the pan almost to the very top. I do my best to fill in all the little corners, but it's usually never perfect. I like to do it in the morning so I can let it dry overnight and check it the next morning. And usually after the first pour, I let it dry for 48 hours-ish to see how much it has shrunk or cracked. And then I inspect each one and decide which one needs a bit more gouache. A lot of times it will shrink a little so that it's separated from the edge of the pan, and then you'll definitely need to fill that in, because if you don't, it will sometimes shrink so much that it will fall out as one big chunk. Some colors shrink way more than others. Some colors dry more brittle than others. Some colors will dry much faster than others. So all I do is squeeze more gouache down into those cracks, and especially along the sides if those are appearing a little bit more open. And then I use a palette knife to kind of push it down even farther into those cracks and level it out as best as I can. It's actually a very satisfying process. And then I will set it out again and let it dry overnight. As you can see, my yellow is constantly shrinking and cracking, and I need to fill that one a lot more than the others. And this is very common for certain colors. You'll need to fill them 3, 4, even 5 times. So I usually like to give myself about a week to prepare my gouache palette before I go out. I don't always give myself that much time because sometimes I'm in a hurry. But pretty much a week later, it's ready to go. I can just pop those into whatever palette I'm using at the time, and I can go out and paint. Another thing you could do, instead of leaving the gouache out on the desk to dry, which I think dries it a little faster, but I end up with more shrinking and cracks. If you have a palette ready to go, you can put the pans in there and then fill the gouache directly in the palette. And then what I like to do is kind of loosely close the lid like this, and I'll just keep it on the desk or on the shelf somewhere and let it slow dry. So it'll take about a week or so for most colors to pretty much dry, not 100% dry, but enough where I can see if anything has shrunk or if there are cracks that I need to come back and fill in. But I'll do the same process where I just fill those in. But if I'm in kind of a rush and I know I'm going somewhere in like a day or two, I'll leave it out on the desk, open air. I mean, you could even put it near like a warm area in your house so that it dries even faster. But again, you're gonna have more cracking and more shrinks that way. Shrinks. Try it in your own home and see kind of what works best for you. When you're done painting with it, as long as you soak up any excess water, you can just close it up and toss it in your bag. And it won't matter if it's upside down or sideways or whatever. It doesn't run because it's mostly kind of solidified. Now this is what it looks like after a lot of use outside. As you can see, it is dry, it is kind of messy. Some of the colors are kind of cracking or they're not crumbling. The main reason you get crumbling gouache is because there's not enough of it in the pan, or if you're using like really cheap student grade stuff. With any of the higher quality brands, I've tried pretty much every single one that's on my gouache database in this palette. All of the high quality ones won't fall out of the palette if you have enough in there and if you use it regularly. If you go like an entire month without touching it, you might get some of the colors shrinking quite a lot, and then there's potential for them to fall out. But if you use the method that I showed you where you pack the gouache into the pan over like a course of a week or two, typically that doesn't happen. I will check on mine like every week or two and just give it a little spritz. Sometimes I'll even use a brush and kind of swirl the water into the gouache. I don't think I've used mine in like 2 weeks. So as you can see, nothing is falling out. It's still fine. And if I spritzed it with water and just let it sit and soak in for a second, it would be completely fine and be usable. So again, I'll put a link to a playlist in the description for all of my gouache videos in which you will see this a lot. I know some of you are here because you found my videos by searching for how to use gouache outside or how to set up a gouache palette, and you've probably seen my old palette, which is a stay wet type palette where the wet gouache goes in and you seal it and it's always wet. That's a very different setup. And I do occasionally use that. Like once a year, I will fill one of those and use it up and then clean it out and I'm done with it. But I don't maintain one of those for an entire year anymore. I don't like keep it going over a long period of time. Honestly, I really like using gouache in a way that is kind of a combination of watercolor and gouache technique. I like starting my paintings with a little bit of transparent wash and then building up the thickness as I get kind of closer to the final stages. Okay, I could seriously talk about gouache and palettes and all of this for hours on end. So I'm gonna leave it here. Hopefully this video helps you set up your gouache palette, and I hope you have fun painting. Take care, everyone.